Hello, my name is Ed Fullman, and the title of this presentation is Leading at the Speed of Code, Empowering High-Performance Teams with DevOps and Machine Learning. Our agenda today will begin with an introduction of me, and then we'll jump into the objectives and goals of the presentation. We'll talk for a little while about Google's DORA report, and then we'll jump into enhancing DevOps with machine learning, use cases for machine learning integration with DevOps processes, an example, Datadog AI-based anomaly detection, and then finally, driving DevOps success through transformational leadership. So to begin with me, I've been working in technology for over 40 years. I started out as a system admin and worked my way up through the ranks at various companies to executive roles. I've held executive roles in 5 startups and 3 major public firms. The largest business I've run has been $250 million in annual recurring revenue with $60 million in EBITDA. I've been involved with a lot of corporate innovation and strategy, spearheading product development in companies since 1992. I've worked in areas such as telecom, OSS and billing, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and IoT. I've raised tens of millions of dollars in early stage capital, as well as successfully completing an IPO. And I've also facilitated other major mergers as a consultant, including running the clean room for the Sprint Nextel merger, which was a $35 billion merger. If I'm known for something, it's for fostering high employee satisfaction and performance simultaneously. And you'll find that this is a common trait that I have with what DORA describes as transformational leadership. It's something I've been working at for a long time. My current role is Chief Product Officer at Veritas Automata, where I'm leading a product development of a SaaS product that integrates blockchain, IoT, and machine learning and AI, both with cloud and edge technologies. So I have some recent experience running DevOps teams as engineering and DevOps and product platform engineering. I'll report up through me at my current role. So let's jump into our objectives. This presentation is focused on the intersection of machine learning and artificial intelligence, and specifically from a leadership perspective, how to drive different value propositions. We're going to cover how this empowers teams and how this will drive important values for those team members and individually as well as groups. And we're going to contextualize this with Google's DORA report, which will give us empirical evidence into how teams that are high performing act, what are their characteristics and behaviors, and how can we drive some of that behavior with things like AI as a tool set to drive performance. So looking deeper into the DORA report, we're going to talk about some of the results in 2023 that they talk about. But first, let's talk a little bit about what is DORA. So it stands for DevOps Research and Assessment. It's a survey that people take on their own initiative. Last year, 36,000 people downloaded and ran the assessment and provided it to Google. And this annual research that they do tries to focus on different aspects of value each year, or essentially how people are describing how value occurs and how teams become high performing. Generally, year to year, one of the concepts that they talk about, especially with DevOps, is balanced teams. These are teams that they describe having the 4 characteristics above, among other things. They have high team performance, so the team itself is high performance, DevOps team. And organizationally, they have high performance, which means that they're able to achieve transformation as an organization, not just the DevOps team. They also have high employee satisfaction and low burnout. And both of these are objectives that I believe AI can own a part of and help these teams achieve their result. The interesting thing in 2023 was that there was a high correlation that they noticed between understanding the focus that users have and how that relates to organizational performance. They say that you can have 40% higher focus or higher organizational performance if you're focused on the users. So this correlation with users is between product management and DevOps. So in other words, if you understand what your customers, what your users want, and how they're going to be successful using something that you're working on, you're going to be, as an organizational, more performant as an organization. You're going to be more performant in how you deliver things if you can keep this focus on the user. So at some level, aligning AI to this user focus is a key part of what's important. In other words, using AI-enabled DevOps to essentially ensure that users are seeing the performance that they need to be successful, as an example. Focusing on the user leads to 20% higher job satisfaction, which is also makes sense in that if you are delivering what someone wants, needs, then you're solving their problem, and you can be very focused in what you're trying to do. You can try to figure out what's important and how to approach things tactically and strategically. So as you can see, the DORA report gives context to this conversation, and it's very important to the overall conversation that the DORA report is trying to drive. This is a page right from the report, and it focuses on the importance of AI. This is the first year that they've actually talked about AI as part of the evaluation. And they've asked the respondents to basically look across these categories on the left and try to understand whether they think it's very important, which is the dark blue rating. And you can see that's about a third of the respondents, or whether they think it's somewhere between not extremely important, but above not important. So the remainder, as you can see, it's pretty equivalent there. The remainder of the respondents is, basically everyone that responded to the DORA report said that essentially AI is important at some level. Some of them are using it in their daily job, or most of them are using it in their daily job, and it has a big value proposition. And at the top of the list is analyzing data generally, which is where we're going to focus in the next few slides as far as examples of machine learning and other things. So we're going to go through 5 different DevOps processes that are use cases for ML integration, and a lot of tools actually support AI in these areas. Each one of these areas comes with a challenge, and you'll see it in a second as we start to discuss it. So automated testing and log analysis are good examples of 2 areas that require a lot of data to be successful. In other words, understanding, what you want to test in an automated way. You can start to figure it out with AI, right? And then you need to understand, like, what is the expected response, right? And you may need to run tests over a significant period of time to understand really how AI can affect the tuning of those individual tests. Log analysis is a much more specific area where you have a great need to get a historical analysis. So you can turn AI on, but the time period over which it's going to do its analysis, it takes a while for it to come up with something useful. So you have to, the implementation of some of these things like log analysis with AI, it requires some time, and the data collection and the use of the data has to be somewhat high performant, and you need to keep a fair amount of data around for a longer period of time to get good use out of it. We're going to talk a little bit about that as we go into a deeper dive. Some of the other areas where you can see the same kind of value is predicting whether configurations are anomalous or not. This is a challenge that companies get into where they have lots of implementations, or they have a platform as a service offering, and need to basically make sure that everybody's been configured similarly and understand what the differences are in some in some cases. Same thing goes with security. You need to lock down all your endpoints in a platform. You need to do that over and over again for each client sometimes. So understanding whether it's been done or not and being able to look at something that's somewhat tedious, like whether things have been configured the same way, or whether it's security or some type of operational configuration, understanding that can be somewhat tedious to achieve when you have thousands of deployments. It becomes at some level very difficult, if not impossible to do when you have very large deployments. So from that perspective, these roles are enhanced by AI's ability to do a repetitive task and to make sure things are happening. More predictive assessments, forecasting and predictive analysis, risk assessment, for example, and even resource allocation becomes, more smart the more data you have to show, right? If you can show examples, they don't become as anomalous when you're looking at one that stands out that's different from the others, right? You need to understand what these look like. And, determining risk requires a good understanding of seasonality and other things, behavioral things that, you might be able to see in data, such as a big drop off from one season to the next, or a corresponding growth because you're running a promotion, a marketing promotion that lowers the cost. Those kind of things, to understand their impact, you have to have the data experience, the historical experience to understand it. A couple more that we outlined here are predictive maintenance. So to predict whether something is going to fail, you have to be able to understand what performance looks like over an extended period of time that represents mean time between failure. So you need to have lots of examples to be able to say that something looks anomalous, or it's going to degrade over time, or to predict its performance over time. Same thing with change impact analysis. All of these require a high amount of data availability, which gets to the complexity of setting these things up and how this all relates together. There is a potential for increased cost because you might not be saving enough data to actually represent what you need to have to make good predictions. You can get into complexities in the setup, which we'll talk about in a second. Setting up or using an AI with a tool set has particular benefits in that you can leverage something that's been pre-built, which may have industry data associated with it, to show you against other similar companies and how you operate and how they operate. But to access those capabilities, if you've highly customized your deployment of the vendor's product, you may have customized it in such a way that the AI won't work because it's based on their normal setup of the solution. So all of these can lead to either poor results from the AI, or increased cost and changing the way you deploy things in order to make it match what the AI is expected. And that all locks you into different vendors, or specific vendors that have a specific way of doing things and their costs, and the potential for them to influence their algorithms in a way that moves away from you. So there's a dependency on history. There's a dependency on how things have been deployed. And all of these relate to potential costs that have to be stood before you deploy. So let's talk about Datadog for a minute. Datadog and the other DevOps solutions that are out there from the big companies all talk about AI-based improvements. Right? In the past, AI or Datadog and other companies all had anomaly detection. It's still their base model is a statistical anomaly detection doing quintile analysis. And in the case of Datadog, their base, the default, is actually not AI. It's actually just statistics. The problem with that kind of analysis, and it's been done for years and years by people that are trying to understand operations, is that it's looking for things in a mean inside. If you've ever seen a box plot, it's the square inside, right? So you're looking at everything that represents the second 20% and the third 20% of a quintile analysis. So from that perspective, anything that falls outside of that box is considered an anomaly of one type or another. And that can lead to, in the DevOps world, alerts being shot off because something looks to be underneath the mean for the period that you're looking at. So if you're not looking at 2 years, for example, which a lot of times you're not going to see seasonality in those numbers. And from that perspective, that's why there are techniques, statistical techniques, that can be used to understand where seasons are, and if not seasons, behaviors, right? Like what happens after a big cost decrease in service that's marketed as a fee decrease or something like that. Those kind of things create anomalies, right? And being able to understand them is really important. Where their AI comes in is that they evaluate this history with a different set of math, and they come up with improvements on the base statistical model that influence to give off a result where you don't get bad alerts. So it suppresses alerts that are actually normal performance given the circumstance, right? But not necessarily within the range of the box in anomaly detection statistics. So it's an add-on of sorts to what they do. And from that perspective, it's very valuable. The challenge, if you watch the videos from Datadog, you can watch some videos from AI researchers that work for them, and they put a lot of work into helping customers that didn't use their base defaults for how to run Datadog. So if you customized it too much, sometimes it confuses the AI, and then they have to do some special stuff to sort it all out that you may or may not have access to. So from these perspectives, there are some things that you have to think about, even with a company like Datadog, who's at the top of the market as far as capability, and all the others do the same thing. So this is an example of a view, and you can see that the date range here is pretty wide, that you're looking at for anomalies. In the first few, I believe, months of this chart, you see a high peak on there. That would be an example of something that they would clip into being an anomaly of some sort. And your ability to see these is important, but you also see there's a pattern there in general across this date range. And that's really what the AI is looking for, is these peaks after peaks. So it might suppress, for example, what it's seeing is that high peak in the first cluster as something that isn't really a key issue that needs to be alarmed. And then why this is important is people like me as an executive see this on a dashboard and don't understand really the context over time and start asking questions. Literally, me asking a question of a DevOps team, my DevOps team, causes them to stop and answer my question. And if the question could have been answered by AI, like just describing that it suppressed the alert or something like that, I would have a better understanding. I would have the understanding that the person would tell me of why this is going off. So that's the value proposition. It really burns out DevOps teams to call them every time something doesn't look right and have multiple people calling them and asking about this stuff, right? So they get compelled to create websites that discuss what the problems are they're having, and then that increases burnout, and they have less time left for strategic things or things that are stimulating, and they end up doing all this tedious work and explaining problems that are problems all the time. So that's really the value of where AI comes into it, and particularly in this example, its purpose is it's suppressing things that actually are normal behavior that don't need to be considered anomalies. So if you think about all this, it's really about the people involved doing the work as much as it is the result that comes to the user at the end. You've got to be able to transform your teams into high performing based on how, as a leader, you approach them. The DORA report looks at these 5 areas as an examples of the kind of characteristics that people have to be really good at, both organizationally above the DevOps team as well as leadership of the DevOps team, and how individuals should handle themselves. You have to have a good understanding of the vision back to the user and the business. If you can't describe what you're trying to do with DevOps within the realm of the business and the business's goals and the goals for users, you're going to miss. And that's going to lead to dissatisfaction on the team, as well as a feeling of low performance from the organization. And in general, you're going to suffer from it. Along with understanding a vision, you need to be able to communicate it inspirationally. It has to be something that's valuable, that everybody sees has value. You've got to create opportunities for personal recognition, especially with people on a DevOps team. They have a tendency to go and, do heroic work off hours and things like that to solve problems that come up along the way, as well as strategic work that they need to keep on schedule. And you need to, like any team, to make personal recognition a part of the strategy for transformation of the team. You got to be supportive and help them understand what they're doing relative to the business goals and the value. And there has to be time for strategic intellectual things where you can talk about the work, you can talk about what could be done and how to build it, how to improve with AI. Those are things that make organizations high performance and their attributes of transformational leaders. What we need to look at is how AI can play a part in this, right? And generally speaking, if we can reduce the tedium, if we can reduce a certain percentage of tasks, it's not so much about cutting out a DevOps person, for example. DevOps teams are many, often hundreds of % in backlog of things that they got to do. And they just can't get to it because they're spending all their time on tedious activities like dealing with an alert that's not an alert, or a whole storm of alerts that aren't a storm of alerts, and writing up big reports and having meetings on top of meetings and discussions. That takes them away from more strategic work that would make them happy, lead to high performance. And all that requires transformation, somebody looking out for them from a leadership perspective to make sure that they get what they need. Well, thank you for your time today. I appreciate your attendance and your attention. And this is Ed Fullman saying thank you and goodbye.